Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you in this holy, holy time. It is not an accident. I do believe it's not accidental that three of the world's major religions are celebrating, commemorating major holidays at this time. And so, to our Jewish, Muslim, and Christian brothers and sisters, may God bless you. Of course, as a Christian, I'm coming off of Resurrection Sunday, and I'm really excited about that. He rose, he rose, he rose. And I hope that all people, whatever your religious faith or whether you're in or out of faith, that you will take comfort and take lessons from Jesus the Christ. We had a wonderful show on Friday that really helped us to reframe Jesus as a political revolutionary, a Palestinian Jew who came not tossing flowers, but really upending the imperial order. I think that if we begin to see and learn the lessons that he taught about how to fight the power, how to create justice, I think it would be a much better world indeed. All of us, and we all have something to learn from each other. And remember, God's commandment is to love. It's not a suggestion, everybody. So why don't we start there? I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you. Please meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. Like and subscribe. And go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. We've been having a little bit of some challenges, but I'm also on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. Facebook page. I'm on Twitter at Santita J. And meet me on over there. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to have Andrew Wyatt on in the second hour. Who is he? You've seen this gentleman who's been escorting Dr. Bill Cosby as he has been facing his legal challenges. But he's also been sought out by Michael Jackson's family. He's been sought out by some of the biggest names in the business because he's one of the finest crisis managers in the world today. We're going to talk to him about P. Diddy. P. Diddy? Well, yeah, because we're talking about power. And is this a distraction? Is this story a distraction? Or is it a set of lessons for us? We're going to talk about that. And really, how is it, why is it that it just seems that whenever Black men reach a certain level, they get knocked down off the perch? And then other people do too if they're not obedient to the social order. So it's just something to think about. We cannot wait to talk with them about that. But we're in the throes of election 2024. We have all been riveted by the $26 million that the Democrats raised last week in New York City. They were in person at Radio City Music Hall. They were virtual. $26 million, filling the Biden coffers, taking them past $70 million. Indeed, he has more cash on hand, officially, than former President Donald Trump. But one of the things that you really did not see was you didn't hear a lot of discussion about the limited access that members of the press had to this event. If you notice, you would hear some corporate media who would say, well, we did not have live cameras in there, but this is what happened. And they had excerpts. Interesting. But also, you didn't hear about the protests. You might have read about them, but the event was interrupted many times by protesters, people who are calling for a ceasefire, who are calling for peace in the Middle East. You did see hundreds, if not thousands of people. They had to block off the streets getting to Radio City Music Hall. Yeah, because of the demonstrations that were being held outside. But you didn't really hear about that. What you are hearing is that it was a triumph, and it was for the Biden administration, but it also is indicative of some challenges that he's going to face in the fall. And so we need to talk about that because you had AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, nearly 20% of the voters in the Democratic primary voted uncommitted. If you'd had more time, you probably would have had more votes. In 21 days in Michigan, they were able to go past their goal of 10,000 votes to 101,000 votes. We have got a lot to talk about today, and we're going to talk with two of our leading activists, Dr. Saba Abor, Palestinian American activist, beautiful, as you can see her in her car driving, but she wanted to be with us today. And Keith Zielinski, the handsome one, of course, from If Not Now. May each of you be blessed in your holy seasons. God bless you both. Let me start with you, Dr. Abor. What happened in New York? It seems like we're not really hearing about what happened there, the scale of it. I think we're missing something, or am I wrong?
Hey, Santita. It's good to see you. It's good to be on here. You look beautiful as always.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I agree
And you
with
make up great.
you. Look gorgeous. I agree with you. It's I think because we're only a couple months away from election day in November. The media, I'm sorry, the Biden's campaign team is doing exactly what I would do if I was in their position: limit media access and try to change the conversation that um, Democrats are with Joe Biden, and that the country is on Joe Biden's side, etc. But social media always wins, right? And even though the media might not be there anymore, like my generation and the generation below me, we don't really watch the news like that. I mean, a lot of our news we get is from like Twitter, social media, and these are from reputable sources, right? We're not just like listening to just random people. But like, I don't even own a TV, so if I turn
Really?
yeah, so I don't even know like what ABC or Fox News is saying. All of my information is coming from social media, and so it's funny that you say that the news didn't even cover it. To be honest, I didn't even know the news didn't cover it because I had seen it through Twitter.
Okay.
Um,
So
and
well,
so
so well. Let me back up then,
yeah,
because I think it's important, Keith and Dr. Arbor, to state that at the outset, because I'm a generation beyond you, and also I still, as I follow social media, and I've had to grow into that. I'm also um, that's becoming more. It's becoming more central to my news aggregating than ever before, but than it has before. But I still turn on the television. I own televisions, and you know, CNN, MSNBC. I've been a commentator, a political analyst on Fox, and on and on and on. Uh, but it's interesting. How do you learn about the events? I mean, how do you gather news?
I mean, there's a lot of investigative journalists that I follow. Folks that, like, for example, Abby Martin is a
Hmm.
great journalist that I love listening to. There's a lot of folks like that who a lot of us get our news from, and just people on the ground who are showcasing exactly what's happening. Mataz is a great example of someone in Gaza who was able to show us, on the ground coverage. It's unfiltered. There's no producers that are editing it to fit a certain agenda, and that's where people are, getting their news from, directly to the source. And I think that's what's been really been able to change the culture. There's been a huge culture shift because people, a big part of it, honestly, not to give him any credit or give him any shine, but Trump was pivotal in that, where he started branding news agencies as fake news. And even though folks don't listen, a lot of young folks don't, progressive folks don't listen to Trump, at the same time too, there's a lot of news stations who, not necessarily fake news, but it's scripted and it's programmed to fit a certain agenda, and people are not accepting it anymore, and they're going straight to the source. We want to see exactly what's happening. Listen, people's phones are out everywhere. Everything that happens, someone's recording something. And so we're able to see things live, right then and there. We're witnessing a genocide live on through people's phones, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, TikTok. We're witnessing a genocide live, and a lot of that's not even being shown on TV news either. And so, social media is what has exposed the truth in many, many, many different situations. Even if you look at police brutality cases, we learned about that from people recording and showing us exactly what was happening. And so it's a new shift, and it's a new wave. That's where people are getting their news from. So even though the news didn't cover Radio City Hall, we all knew about it.
Keith Zelensky, you tell me. I mean, what do you see? Because
Yeah, I mean,
when I was looking at the coverage, and that it's interesting because older people, it's like older people gravitate toward Facebook, and as you get younger,
Boomergram.
yeah, it's just it changes. Talk to me. What were your impressions of what happened in New York and how it was covered, how it was conveyed to the American public?
Yeah, so there's an interesting centralizing focus here, for me at least. I hear Biden speak publicly all the time about the need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, as if he has no control over getting that humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's insulting. It's actually insulting to the intelligence of the American citizenry, as if we are being fooled into thinking that that our government has no dictation over how Israel conducts itself. If we cut off military aid today, Israel would not be able to sustain its military efforts for, they certainly wouldn't be able to do what they're doing in Rafah and continue to do what they're doing. They wouldn't be able to continue their aerial assault campaign. So, and if we just use that as leverage to say, hey, we're not going to give you anything. We're not going to give you support. We're not going to shield you from accountability in the UN unless you turn around right now and get out of Gaza and let humanitarian aid get into Gaza. It's as simple as that. It really is. Past presidents have done it. Ronald Reagan was famous for it. Mehdi Hassan did a great piece on this. So when he speaks at these fundraisers and just says, gives platitude statements and mentions, Israel needs to do better. They need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's infuriating to people. And that's why you're seeing the pushback and the protests, because people are getting increasingly frustrated, and it's resulting in the way that we're seeing it play out. Obama was with Biden, obviously, and when he was being heckled from the crowd and protested, he said something to the effect of, see, that's the problem. You guys, you just know how to talk. You don't listen.
How did that make you feel when he said that? I mean, what went through your mind?
Well, it's ironic because that's all they do is talk. That's all they do is talk. They don't actually, there's no substantive action behind their words. They say Israel has to let humanitarian aid into Gaza. They say they have to prevent the killing of children and the killing of innocent people, and they don't actually do anything about it. So it's just empty words. They are doing, it's kind of like Israel. Every accusation is a confession for Israel. Every accusation is a confession when it comes to human shields and when it comes to a lot of other things, obviously. But in this instance, the accusation of, well, you guys, all you protesters do is talk. You don't actually listen. Well, you're not listening to your Democratic electorate. Democrats overwhelmingly want a ceasefire. So they're the ones not listening. It's not us. They're blaming the voters. They're blaming the people when it's obviously on them.
Well, I mean, in furtherance of your point, so what did it make you, just given that I think uncommitted has become a movement, which I think is a little bit more than a voting happenstance, right? So what does it say to you when the Democratic Party They say that the race will be tighter than this. I have two fingers up together for those of us in the for those of you in the radio audience. They're supposed to be really, really tight. I'm not so sure how tight that is because I think that Trump is a little bit stronger, Keith, than people want to give him credit for being. I mean, because they kind of push at him real hard. If he didn't have any strength, he's someone you'd ignore, right? And then you've got Robert Kennedy. What did it mean to you? And Cornel West and Jill Stein. I mean, they're going to be factors, I do believe, come fall. What does it say to you then that you have three American presidents who are on stage, who remain popular? Certainly, the corporate media tells us that they remain very popular with the public. You know, President Obama is iconic. Arguably, so is Bill Clinton. And even though Biden is not popular, he's still the president right now. What does it say to you as we're coursing through this election season that you have three American presidents who are Democrats who are on the stage who, like you said, didn't hear you? Or do you think they heard you and ignored you? Keith. First you, Keith, and then you, Dr. Abor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very obvious that they hear us loud and clear. They're just ignoring us because they have no incentive to listen to us at this point, other than to get elected. So they're making a political calculation, and their strategists, these bigwigs in DC that are paid lots and lots of money for political strategy to treat Palestinians as political pawns, is playing into their public image and how they portray themselves to the public with how they speak about Israel needing to do this and that. So they're trying to appease the Democrats that think Biden needs to do more. And Biden is trying to hear that message and speak to it in the public while doing nothing in private behind closed doors with Bibi Netanyahu. So he's just trying to appease. It's a political strategy, and it's inherently nefarious and insidious, and it only hurts us as the American electorate. Or it hurts the Palestinians in Gaza the most. It hurts the Palestinians here in America whose taxpayer dollars are going towards their own genocide. So, I mean, it's absolutely despicable. And of course, the media won't cover that. They won't say it how it is because their whole purpose in this scope is to get Biden reelected.
Because well, then what does it say to you that the White House, pardon me, but I mean, because you're tapping into some points, and I want you to jump in, Dr. Sabor, after Keith finishes. I mean, the White House is trying to restrict access at campaign events. What does it say to you? I mean, campaign events, you show come on, come all. You want everybody in. No. They want smaller and smaller events with fewer and fewer people whom they are vetting.
To what Dr. Abor mentioned earlier about millennial generation, Gen Z, etc. We're getting our information and our news from social media because it's capturing a lot of pivotal moments that are unfolding in this political landscape and the geopolitical landscape and what's happening in Gaza in a way that the mainstream media isn't covering. For example, there was an event held by Kamala Harris where a woman with a hijab was not allowed in because she was wearing a hijab. It was very obvious. That is absolutely deplorable. I don't see any coverage of that in the mainstream media when it was actively being live streamed on social media and it was recorded. So, I mean, I think that says it all to what you just mentioned. And yeah, I'll finish on that.
Yeah, I mean, because Dr. Abor, it's very interesting to see, because coming from media, having, I've had a lot of different lives here, singer and all these other things that I've done, but coming through media, it's very interesting, when when the media turns on you, the pictures of you become unflattering. When you see someone in the paper, when you see someone in the news, you knew Gerald Ford, you all missed this, that he did not have long to be president because they kept capturing him falling up and down the stairs. Now, this is a former football player at the University of Michigan. So clearly, he is someone who knows how to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. But he became clumsy, a klutz to the American public, and we certainly don't want our president to be that. Now we're seeing stories about President Biden rising in the polls. Now he's got more cash on hand than former President Trump. $26 million. You have these titans of American political life. Clinton, Obama, and Biden get on the same stage, and some of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Ha ha. But there was something else going on. They were interrupted multiple times, and the presidents themselves were interrupted when they had the conversation. What does that say, Dr. Abor?
I mean, I think it says that you can't run from genocide. And I mean, look at what they're trying to. I mean, Congress is trying to ban TikTok right now because they understand the importance of the fact that people aren't swayed anymore by what the media is saying. They're not swayed as much by what politicians are saying. I mean, we all grew up kind of like in our friend circle and stuff where we knew as kids that like we don't believe politicians, you know? And now that I work in that space, it's become a lot more evident on why.
Well, why? What is
I
it about politicians that can be off-putting or that can turn you off?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Santita, you were very close with us in the Chicago City Council ceasefire resolution. I mean, I had politicians from all around who literally said, like, look, like our donors do, like, they're like, look, listen, I support a ceasefire, but my donors don't support it. Straight to my face, you know? And people base, you know, it's a survival instinct, and it's the same thing with President Biden. You know, he is AIPAC's largest donor, and of course he's going to side with whatever AIPAC wants to do because AIPAC is keeping him alive. And so the minute that politicians are starting to see that, look, lobbying money isn't going to work on our generation and generations younger than us, that's why they're starting now to want to ban TikTok and wanting to control, limiting political content on Instagram, limiting content on Twitter. You have Elon Musk, who's now limiting content on Twitter. I don't know if you saw on Instagram, but Instagram limited everyone's accounts where you had to go in and manually change your account. So they turned on, there's a feature and it shows on there, it says limit political content. Instagram turned that on everyone's accounts. I didn't ask for that to be turned on. And you had to go back into your account and manually turn it off. And so it's you know, it's strategies like that where they're starting to get scared. I think a Trump presidency is also very scary. But
isn't this scary?
A President Biden, yeah, no, I agree. A President Biden is just as scary.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, because to me, when you have fascism, it manifests itself on the right and the left.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's happening now is scary. You didn't have any options on the Republican side. You had more options on the Republican side in the primary than you had on the Democratic side. I think that's scary.
Yeah. And you know what? What I think is going to happen, I do think Trump will win. And what I think will happen is it's going to push everyone to the left and realize that, look, you can't just throw away, you can't be complicit in a genocide and go along with it and become president, because your base is going to be fractured. Like the one thing about Republicans, I always say this, that I love about Republicans, they stick together no matter what. Look, they might not like each other, they might not agree with each other, but when it comes down to it, they stick together, and Democrats don't. And they don't listen to their younger base. They don't listen to people that look like, you know, all of us on this call right now. They don't listen to us. They only listen to people that donate to them because it's a survival strategy. And so, um, yeah, my whole point on this is that um, Democrats will realize from this election how pivotal the Palestinian issue is and how pivotal it is to listen to young progressive voices because they're going to lose the election.
Do you think that young progressives, or do you think that there are some voters who are willing to lose the White House to Trump, or hey, it could be Robert Kennedy? We don't know. They're all on the
Yeah,
right they're
yeah.
all to the right on ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, they don't support it. Do you think that people are willing to lose the presidency?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Chicago voting numbers and on, you know, 2 weeks ago, 3% of young voters came out and actually voted.
Hmm.
Biden won from young voters. And young voters aren't going to come out and vote again for somebody that, I didn't vote for Joe Biden. I didn't vote for Trump. I wrote one of my friends in, literally like one of my good friends. I was like, I'm just going to write him in because I refuse to just pick the lesser of two evils. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people, especially like in our community, um, like shamed into voting for President Biden, and people didn't. People went out and voted for President Biden, and look, he's complicit in genocide. And so I think that people won't come out and do that again. And I think that we realize how dangerous a Trump presidency is for Palestinians. I mean, Trump has blatantly said, you need to wipe them out already. Trump, moved the Israeli embassy into Jerusalem. Like, we know that Trump is bad for us, but I think what the good that might come out of it is it's going to show the Democratic Party that you will lose if you don't support progressive um ideals that we support. I mean, look at the Chicago elections, right? Because we didn't have young voters come out, because we didn't have people engaged in the election process, we lost Bring Chicago Home, and we lost Clayton Harris from winning.
Hmm.
And that's because young voters didn't come out. And that's because we had the lowest voting lowest, and it was a beautiful day. It was 50 and sunny outside. So it wasn't
In
weather
March
related.
in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah. And it's because there's a lack of excitement. And
But
so,
but hold on, because I think you're making a point about, and I think, and I'd like you to stay with this for a hot second, Keith, too, but you finish up this point, Dr. Abor. The impact that Biden and his unpopularity and his intransigence on Gaza, for example, and what he's doing with Haiti is just, to me, is
yeah.
equally despicable.
Yep.
Um, it's impacting down ballot. It's impacting us down ballot. I mean, so
Yep.
you're losing states' attorney generals. You're losing judgeships. These are the people who we have to live with every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's I think, will hopefully people will be able to realize that is that it's not just the presidency. We're going to also lose on other candidates that we need to have in office.
Hmm.
And we can't have right-wing candidates. But, America, unfortunately, has always had to learn things the hard way. And, um, you know, eventually the folks that are in office now, 10, 20 years are probably not going to be in office. They're going to eventually retire, etc. And we're going to have younger folks that are going to be in there. And that narrative is going to shift. And then we're going to see a huge political shift just from my lifetime alone. Like, I'm 31 now. And when I was younger, you couldn't talk about Palestine. Like, we couldn't have these types of conversations
I was
without being
there.
canceled. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Santita. Yeah. You guys have experienced that. And so now it's like people are talking about Palestine and they don't care. And
Well, I think because they do, because it was called the P word. I know when
yeah.
Reverend Jesse Jackson ran for the presidency, pushing for Israeli security and Palestinian justice. It was at a time when you did not accept Arab money in presidential campaigns.
Yeah.
And it was at a time when you absolutely, I mean, you had South African apartheid. And so people, um, Mandela, for him to come out and say, "I want freedom for Mandela." Mandela was even classified as a terrorist by our government when he was president of South Africa and visiting the United States.
Yeah.
So we do have right wing tendencies in the United States, but I think it's fascinating, Keith, Dr. Arbor's point, because I saw you nodding vigorously in assent, that it does appear, and when I see the commentators on television that you don't watch, but it's very interesting to see them as they really seek to mold opinion. They're saying, but in the fall, everything's going to turn around because people don't want Trump. And what Dr. Arbor is saying is something that I'm hearing increasingly from people. They're like, I already lived through Trump. You can't fearmonger with him the way you did in 2020. It's a different day. We're witnessing a genocide. We're witnessing horrors in Haiti. We're witnessing Yemen. I mean, we're seeing things on the ground that are just absolutely horrifying. We're watching people die every day, and it's our tax dollars that's funding so much of this. Do you think, as you talk to people, as you organize, I mean, you're an activist with If Not Now, are people really, to your way, from what you're hearing from people, would you agree that people are willing to, hey, Democrats, you've got to learn a lesson. I can't let you get away with this. What do you say? I mean, do you think that people are willing to have another Trump presidency as opposed to re-electing Biden, who does not support he really doesn't support the ceasefire either?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't even accept that Palestinians' lives should be valued equally, let alone a ceasefire.
You really believe that?
Oh, I mean, his actions show it.
Mm-hmm.
His actions show it. I mean, there's really not much else to say beyond that. When he is literally enabling a genocide by sending unconditional military aid to Israel as they wage a genocide, what the ICJ calls a plausible genocide at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just don't see the argument for how he does treat Palestinians as equals. I mean, this is why you have seen two State Department officials, I believe, step down, as well as a Palestinian American in a different cabinet. But yeah, I mean, it's really disheartening to see. I think people, to circle back to your question, Santita, I think people are willing to be patient. When I say patient, I mean, I think people are willing to wait and see until November, which is unfortunately like the only thing we can do. I mean, that's the only thing we can do is wait till November and find out and pressure him relentlessly until election day comes. So, I mean, me personally, I'm not voting for Biden, but I know that when you're talking about like the mainstream American public,
Mm-hmm.
the Democrats who do want Biden to initiate a ceasefire and put conditions on military aid to Israel because they see the horrifying reality on the ground, I think those people are hoping that Biden turns a leaf, so to speak, and initiates a ceasefire between now and election day so that they don't have to have that like very tough moral decision when they show up to the ballot box, because I think a lot of people will face a lot of like internal conflict with their morality if Biden chooses not to do something before the Palestinians are just frankly ethnically cleansed completely out of Gaza forever, because that's what Israel plans to do. They literally state it all the time. That's their plan, is to fully ethnically cleanse Gaza. And Biden is enabling that. And people don't want to come to terms with it.
Why do you think people want to do that? Why do you think people don't want to come to terms with it?
just the mythology of American exceptionalism and this idea that Biden has been on has done good things, and when it comes to other policy actions and so forth. I think Biden obviously has a reputation that he's built over his time in office in the Senate for so long, and there's a lot of respect for Biden amongst the older generations, especially. It's, he is elected president. He was vice president, and I think people want to believe that he has that empathy for everyone and not just people that look like him. And I think he's been like that. That's one of the reputations he's had, is like being a president that has a soft soul, that has a soft heart and compassion, because he's gone through a lot of struggle in his own immediate family with his son's death and so forth. So he has shown moments of compassion and empathy, and that's why it's incredibly frustrating for people to see that he has shown zero empathy in this time, when in this incredibly devastating time.
Do you think that the ask is big enough? I mean, first you, Dr.
No.
and you. I mean, when they'll start, Keith, is the ask big enough? I mean, ceasefire.
No, it's not.
Just to stop shooting.
No.
And then letting the two-state solution just kind of be out there.
What two-state solution?
Okay.
What two-state solution? Because Israel's been expanding settlements in the West Bank nonstop, no matter if it's Bibi Netanyahu or their moderate / left-wing prime ministers that they've had otherwise. So it's been constant settlement expansion, constant brutal occupation against Palestinians in the West Bank, and a brutal siege on Gaza since they pulled out in 2005. And it's been absolutely relentless. So I don't see that all this talk about a two-state solution is very similar to Biden's public portrayal that we're seeing today about how we need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. We need to get. He's like a broken record. He says the same thing every single time, as if it's going to manifest when he speaks it. It's just going to manifest out of into reality. But he actually has to do things, right? If we actually have to hold Israel accountable on the international stage. And we have to capitalize on movements like BDS to do we have to use the South Africa apartheid model that was, the BDS model that was used against South Africa to rip down their apartheid regime.
And it did work.
Yeah,
I mean, I was in college. I participated in it. I mean, and it became the thing up at Yale. They had a shanty town on the yard. I mean, it was just, and it was huge. I was in school in Washington, D.C. I had a lot of friends at Yale, but I was in school in Washington, D.C. I was arrested at the South African embassy. That became a thing, the thing to do, and you were boycotting. And if corporations were doing business with South Africa, you boycotted them. I mean, that became a real thing, and that pressure. And then, of course, you had the Jackson campaign that really elevated it and made it and put it in the Democratic platform and made it part of the national conversation, which is very, very important, because that's when we started getting arrested at the embassy at the end of his campaign in '84. Because all these things built on one another. I mean, do you think that a BDS campaign is something that could take off now? I mean, because it's something that has really been resisted, Keith.
I mean, I think it is taking off as we speak. I'm not so in tune with like the BDS actions and like the tangible effect they're having, but I do know like McDonald's has lost a lot of money since BDS has taken action against them. There's large corporations that have suffered huge losses in revenue, such as McDonald's, as a result of BDS.
Starbucks too has been big.
Yeah, Starbucks too has been big. And there's other, the BDS campaign is strong and is growing. And that seems to be like the grassroots like the viable grassroots campaign that can really have a tangible effect on things. Because the two-state solution, it's unfortunately a sad joke at this point. It's just a broken record. Like I'm tired of hearing about it. Why do Palestinians have to go through complex negotiations to have basic human rights and dignity? Why do they have to go through complex negotiations for that? Why Israel has a brutal military occupation and apartheid over the West Bank. That just needs to be lifted, and no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Just get out of the West Bank. Just get out and take your settlers with you. There shouldn't be complex negotiations around that.
And if I can make a note real quick, Santita, on your question about the BDS movement. I mean, BDS movement has, made huge strides. When you look at, there's been so much legislation that's come out to try to prevent anyone that partakes in BDS movements to put sanctions on them. I mean, you look at, for example, in Illinois, there's current legislation right now on it. I forget exactly who had introduced it, but there's legislation in Illinois trying to prevent BDS from occurring. But if you look at the movement as a whole, it's made tangible strides. You look at in university, U of C or UC Davis, the students over there, they got their school to divest from Israel, and so that's been huge to see that happening. And we need to have more BDS resolutions, and asking schools to divest from corporations that are directly investing into Israel. And so the movement is there and it's growing, but people really need to actively participate in it. So it looks like abstaining from purchasing products that are on the BDS boycott list. And folks sometimes don't do that because it's not as sexy as it is to go out to a protest. And it's, people still like to go grab their pop in certain places. And so, that's not to make that point. And then the other point I also really wanted to make quickly is that when we look at, Joe Biden calling for a ceasefire, Kamala Harris calling for a ceasefire.
Wait a minute, for 6 weeks.
Yeah. But not even that. It's like then Biden just approves just a couple days ago billions of dollars of weapons and fighter jets over to Israel. So it's like, how are you going to say we need a ceasefire, but then you go and you supply them with the weapons and bombs and basically be like, and fighter jets, and be like, yes, we need a ceasefire, but wait, here you go, continue the assault. And so what a real ceasefire looks like is stop funding Israel, put sanctions on Israel. That's what needs to happen in order for, we've done it to other nations. All of a sudden now we know it's not okay to do that because they're an ally of ours. Look, we've crippled other countries. Look at Venezuela. The reason why we have the migrant crisis that we do here in Chicago is because of, we put sanctions on Venezuela and crippled their economy. And those are the real conversations we need to have.
Well, going into 2024, I ask you, is the ask big enough? Is it enough?
No.
Just to ask, please don't shoot me. Because that's what ceasefire is.
No, it's not.
Really? Is that?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
what should be fought for at this point? Because this is the time, I think, for voters to make demands.
Yeah, stop funding Israel. Israel needs to, and there needs to be sanctions on Israel until they stop killing people.
Keith, because just to please don't shoot me anymore, that's not enough.
No.
You need so much more than that now. And I think if we're not going to ask now, if not now, no pun, but if not now, when? If not us, who? Where do we go from here? Because what do you ask of Robert Kennedy, who's to the right of Biden, and on the whole matter of peace in the Middle East? So, and everything, it's counter to every other stance that he's taken. You've got Cornel West and Jill Stein, who are kind of outliers, but I'm hoping that they can push the conversation. I mean, where will the conversation go as we go to the election, Keith? I mean, where do you see this conversation going?
We send on average $3.8 billion to Israel every single year. They receive the most taxpayer funded foreign aid from the United States on a yearly basis. They're a developed country that has an iron dome that literally shoots down incoming rockets. And they have free health care for their citizenry. They have subsidized social services for their people, more so than what we have in the United States when it comes to healthcare and education. But yet we're subsidizing their military, their genocide that they're imposing on the Palestinians, and their brutal military occupation and apartheid in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So I think the conversation needs to be around ending that foreign aid to Israel, which is a direct result of the Israel lobby in the United States and AIPAC, which lobbies politicians to enact legislation that sends money to Israel. This is how that works. When you bribe politicians to do things, this is the outcome you get. And in this instance, when it comes to Israel, AIPAC is that lobbying organization that bribes politicians to do exactly that. It's not about being pro-Jewish, because they've actually ran and funded campaigns against Jewish candidates. So it's nothing to do with being Jewish. It's about being pro-Israel, which stems from a political ideology based around settler colonialism in Palestine in the form of a Jewish supremacist state. And that is where the conversation needs to be led to, because now people are starting to wake up. People are starting to become more aware of the evil nature of Israel's existence and what Israel actually does against the Palestinian people. People are becoming more aware of that because of social media, right? They're actually seeing Israeli soldiers executing people, raising a white flag. I mean, you can't call that anti-Semitic. If I show that to someone and they say, "Oh, you're just showing me anti-Semitism," that doesn't make any sense, because that is the only thing they have now. Whenever we raise the issue of Palestinian liberation, they just come back and say, "You're just being anti-Semitic." Well, people aren't buying that anymore.
Mm.
So the conversation needs to be around ending military aid to Israel once and for all. They are a developed country, and they can pay for their own military if they want to. And we can still hold them accountable in the International Court of Justice. We can hold them accountable in the International Criminal Court. Heck, we could even hold American leaders accountable in the International Criminal Court. It would never happen, I don't think, obviously, but it is theoretically possible. Biden is, in my mind, enabling genocide. He is a core part of the genocide. Biden is. He is responsible at this point. So I think that Biden very well might be the last pro-Israel Zionist Democratic president of the United States for the foreseeable future. I think that's a real possibility because of the new age of information. And if you look at the generation of the Jewish American Jews, it's a huge, huge dichotomy between young Jews and older Jews. Older Jews that were, just like me, have been brainwashed into Zionism from a young age. I went to synagogue, and you have the Israeli flag on one side, and you have the United States flag on the other. and it's taught to be a core inherent piece of your Jewish faith, and therefore a core part of your Jewish identity. And therefore, when someone criticizes Israel, someone is criticizing you as a person. But now young Jews are starting to wake up out of that. It's happening rapidly in this moment, even though they would have you think otherwise. Obviously, we're starting from down here, right? We're starting from the floor. So it still has a ways to go. But this is what groups like If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace are trying to do. And this is what we're having success. It's obviously not like having a tangible impact in the form of like getting a ceasefire now and ending military aid to Israel now. That is something that needs to play out with time, unfortunately, but it will come.
The last 2 minutes belong to you, Dr. Abor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that November is going to be incredibly interesting, and I'm excited to see what that holds. And I think that I agree with Keith that, people have awakened, and we're going to see a new set of just revolutionaries that are going to arise from this. And we're in exciting times, but also very, very scary times as well.
But a new day is upon us.
Yeah.
Of course, after October 7th, I know that the expectation was the narrative was going to go in one direction. But one thing you do know, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
Things can change on a dime. And I think that is what's happened. But justice is upon us. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to vote and to ask questions and to have the right ask, Keith Zelensky of If Not Now and Dr. Saba Abor, Palestinian American activist. We've got to have the right asks because you know what? We can have the right kind of world. We just have to make a decision that we're going to make it happen. And when I see you, Keith Zelensky, and you, Dr. Saba Abor, I know it's going to happen. I know that the world is in great hands with you, young people. What, Generation Z? I don't know what it is, but I know I'm not in it. But I love you.
Well, you led the fight for us. You led the fight before we were even there. So you created that opportunity for us to even be at this point.
And just look, you got the baton. Go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
There we go. Oh, please, honey, just get on around this track. We got many more laps to go.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
The struggle continues, but victory is certain as long as you continue the struggle. Just remember that. I'm sending you much love, both of you in this holy season. May God bless you.
Thank you. You as well. Happy Easter, Santita.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.
Coming up, I've got Andrew Wyatt to talk to us about P. Diddy and power and black men and what is really going on. Is this a distraction or is it something else? Is it something else? What is it? What is it? How is it that all of these black men get to the apex of power and then they all crumble? It doesn't happen to anyone else, not as far as I see. So let's talk about it in the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment.